Thank you. I'm glad to be here. Mhm. Yes, that is agreeable. Yeah, yes, I am. And let me just add that I was at First Chinese Baptist Church for 17 years. Uh, for 17 years, and I've been retired for 10 years before Lakeshore, Oakland called me back as interim. So, sure. Well, the context in which local church ministry finds itself in today is often in a success model, meaning that mega churches with large physical plants with multiple staff and all kinds of extra resources for programming is often seen in America or in Protestantism as a successful church because you didn't have to worry about money or making a regular appeal for resources, but rather the church is quite funded or very resourceful. And I'm not sure whether that kind of reputation of a church is seen necessarily as the only model in which God is calling faithful people to be. Uh, so so when I talked about scarcity and abundance, it's often seen as when a church is financially struggling, um, it's is it still faithful? And I think that it's not the dollar sign that we define a church is how faithful the congregation is. And therefore, when I say enough is enough, meaning that whatever God has provided that congregation with resources, not just monetary, but time and gifts and abilities, I do believe that God will provide all the rest that is needed. Yes. Wow. When you are, not you, but when churches see themselves as credible or successful, they don't have anything to worry about. And and I think that that's what, like you said, the spirit of capitalism seemed to help us to see. Um, but not to be judgmental, but some churches remain faithful to fulfill the mandate of what it means to be a follower of Jesus. But others begin to chase after mammon or the idol of capitalism in the U.S. And then I think that's where we get distracted from the real core mission of the church. Um, So, like at Lakeshore, to use a specific example, um, I would say that it was in the past a much more capable church financially, membership wise. Therefore, from the members, you get all kinds of talents and abilities and the professional expertise that comes with a large membership congregation. And I think there's a mentality right now at Lakeshore of wishing that we would go back to the good old days and to try to shift that thinking to say that that's not really the norm, but rather the norm of faithfulness is, as we say, when two or three are gathered together, God is here. And so, what is God doing with Lakeshore today, with a smaller membership, with perhaps less resources? And that is an ongoing search. Every church goes through that. Yeah. Yes. Yes. Yes, I have absolutely shared this with the congregation as well as with the people whom I meet during my ministries, uh, both here. Yeah, because the Old Testament requirement of a tie is something that is obviously relevant in the Old Testament, but in today's world, especially living in the United States, the most richest nation on earth, asking for 10%, in my opinion, is no different from giving loose change to someone in need. Uh, the cost of discipleship is to give sacrificially. And so when someone is earning $1 million, you can't tell me that you can't live on $900,000 a year. So, uh, in stewardship education, especially with American Baptist churches, we've been teaching proportional giving. So 10% may not be enough, but how about 20% or 30%? Because that's where faithfulness begins, is when you don't always have to depend on your own efforts, but rather trust and depend on God's provision. And I think we can learn more of what that means as modern 21st century Christians. Hmm. Yeah. Hmm. Yes. Yeah. The backdrop of this, Lee, is that when I came to First Chinese Baptist in 1998, I was given the assignment after the church has already voted to retrofit the church for earthquake safety, mandated by the city of San Francisco. But they had already contracted a fundraising firm headquartered in Los Angeles. So they already signed a contract, and I then had to learn what a typical religiously based fundraising campaign is going to look like. And one of those things that they always do is to have like a dinner where uh, the church provides a rubber chicken dinner that is barely edible. And then at the end, after, yeah. 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 So after you talk about how the vision of the church requires a major gift, then you pass out these pledge cards, and people almost feel like they are led. You know, they ate the chicken, therefore they want to make a pledge. So to me, it's kind of, what's the word? It's kind of campy, but that's what it is, and we need to call it that way. But what I found, oh yeah, not that kind of campy. But but I also realized very quickly that it wasn't the chicken dinner or even the pledge card. It's the fact that at that dinner, which we also had, people who have not come to church for weeks, if not years, or children who now are parents of young children, they all came together, and it became like a church family reunion. The bond of fellowship was like contagious. And so we did not at this church, nor should we compel or shame people to give. They need to give from a generous heart. But when people got together, they share memories of how it was when they were growing up at the church and what it can be if we supported this project for our grandchildren. People wanted to give. We didn't have to force them to give. And so the emphasis is on fellowship, interpersonal relationship, and the pitch, the opportunity to give is very, very secondary toward the end. Oh, yes. Well, well, okay. Not to say that uh, corporate America, like Salesforce here in San Francisco, should be the model in which we imitate. But Salesforce, for example, has started to require their employees to come back into the office because yes, there is a synergy. There is a non-objective effect that cause people to be in the same room together that result in better discussion and more broadly approved decisions that needed to be made. So my uh, principle for this is that God could have saved the world by just turning on God's omniscient or omnipotent power. But why did God send Jesus to live among us, to walk among us? Okay, so to practice incarnational theology, having Zoom meetings without in-person meeting is actually non-incarnational. So, inasmuch as God became human to be our salvation in the world, we may use Zoom or FaceTime or any other media to do some of the more minimal or predictable kind of transactions, but it should not replace an incarnational presence with each other. And so well, I'll tell one example. When I first came to Lakeshore in November of last year, uh, they had already defaulted as almost a regular thing to meet on Zoom every Tuesday morning at 10:30 for staff meeting. I'm just using that as one example. Yeah, and I said, well, this is okay, but I don't get a chance to do much more than just to hear you and you hear me. And so, in order to expedite a more interpersonal relationship, we are now meeting in person every other week. So one week is on Zoom, and then the next week is in person. And I think we have facilitated much more, um, what's the word, uh, transformative type of discussion that leads to more consensus. Whereas before, it's like we can't read body language. We can't, uh, it's hard to interrupt, right? And, even though, Zoom has, you can raise your hand and you can do this and all that kind of, but it's not the same. And so, yes, you can have, yes, yeah, all of that is important. So I would encourage local churches that yes, it's so easy to stay in your pajamas or not put on makeup or whatever you want to do to be presentable, but don't don't throw away, for example, the incarnational aspect of being a community of believers. Right? Yes. Exactly. Yes. Hmm. Okay. Hmm. Yes. Yes. Yeah. So the phrase form follows function means that function is your vision and mission, and then you organize around that in what we call form. And form can be defined as like your structure, how your organization is designed to make decisions and so forth. So it's trying to get the horse before the cart. Um, we always say that an organization that doesn't have a purpose or a vision will perish. I mean, this is true here too. Um, using Lakeshore as an example, Lee, you heard from our moderators that in our structure right now, there are 84 positions in our church organizational chart. Uh, that's a lot. And you and I know that on the average, there's about 75 people who come to worship. And a good church or a more relevant church always would try to recruit people who are coming regularly to serve in these positions, board members or department members and chairpersons, so forth. So our vice moderator, who leads the nominating committee, has been frustrated in recent years of trying to get enough people to fill these positions. So it's a great example that our form, an old, perhaps too outdated organizational structure, is not serving the church today. We are heavily right. Oh, so here's yeah. So here's another kind of little saying. We we're doing more playing church than doing church. We're maintaining a bureaucracy without actually doing mission. Because if you're saddled with all of these kinds of trying to organize these committees to meet and filling these kinds of positions, you're only just playing church. You can almost say we are church, but we're not actually doing what God is calling us as a church to do in the world. Yeah. Mm. Mhm. Right. Well, we know that God calls people to ministry and not just ordained ministers, but all persons. But we're not called to the same mission or because we in Ephesians we talk about we're gifted with different gifts, and therefore there's all these in those days different kinds of officers that are part of the church. So not everyone is going to be a Sunday school teacher, or not everyone is going to go into ordained ministry, but with different gifts, we together make up all of the necessary resources to be faithful. So if our gifts are different, then I think that it's important for us to discern what those gifts are. And it's when we put people in the wrong places is where they burn out. Their motivation is to always serve and to help out. And if we don't know their gifts or their talents, we put them in certain kinds of positions because they felt like maybe they have felt obligated to do that, they'll burn out. So, yeah, yeah. I mean, you and I know that if you're doing something that really touches your passion, doesn't matter whether 8 hours is over, you'll be doing this for another 8 hours. And then you realize, yeah, it's not a job, it's a vocation, right? And yeah, yeah, sure. Okay. Well, that's a whole mouthful of comments and questions, Lee. Uh, I don't remember his first name, but this guy named Greenleaf. Greenleaf wrote a very important book years ago about servant leadership. Uh, and what I remember about Greenleaf's book is this: is a leader enables others to lead. And so, if you're a pastor of a church, let's just use that as one position. Uh, the first realization is that we are not above everyone else, especially in a congregational base church like the Baptist. We are servant leaders, and we will always be servant leaders. So I draw a lot of inspiration from those who are in serving capacities. Uh, yeah, sure. Go ahead. Yes. Yeah. Well, uh, we here in the Western world, including places like Europe and the rest of North America, put so much emphasis on property, right? Private property, public buildings, uh, even our houseless members of our society. We call them houseless or homeless because we are defined often by the physical property that we have. And that I think is a bit misleading because then that translates into a church membership to define church as the church building. And that takes away from what we call the beloved community. Uh, it takes away from the fact that each person in a church, that's really church, not the beautiful sanctuary. And so here's a little takeaway, Lee. As Lee knows, Lakeshore Avenue Baptist Church on our Sunday bulletin has a picture of our church front sanctuary. Not only is it a picture, but it's in color. And some people are saying, well, can't we just print black and white? We'll save some money on the cartridges. But other people insist that no, we want our church building in color. So why do we do that? Because that doesn't represent the church. We should have a picture of the congregation. We should have a picture of Jesus, if anything. But yeah, but we should not necessarily have and a lot of churches, not just Lakeshore, churches across the country, other denominations seem to worship our property rather than worship God. So that's one example of a kind of a, what's the word? It's not a total error, but it's a misreading or a misfocus of where we should be emphasizing. So, yeah. So it's the people is the church, not the buildings. Okay. Yeah. Well, thank you. Well, I just want to say to your professor that it's been an honor and a joy to talk to Lee as one of your students, and that he's doing a great job. All right, Lee. I'll see you Sunday. Yeah, bye-bye.